And it is really lovely. It is completely built out and like
big.
ready to go and big and like big windows, lots of light, all of the facilities you could think of. Compared to your average school, it has much more space, like just even the hallways are more spacious, all the kind of in-between spaces, all the like office spaces, all of the classrooms are really big. Like if you've toured a lot of other public schools, you're like, wow, this is a heck of a building. Like it's really amazing. 66?
66.
Okay. So we don't know everything, but what we do know so far is that the rent has been paid, the space is now empty, there is a lease. I'm not sure how long it goes for, but the city is beholden to that lease, at least in like
At least 10 years.
the realm of
If
what
not 20.
normal commercial leases would be, right? So it just seems to us such a shame that it is empty. Like, it's crazy. I don't know how much money they've spent on it or what has been done so far.
Have we actually seen the lease?
We have not actually
Has
seen the
the
lease
upper seen the lease?
yet. Last I spoke to her, she had not seen the lease yet.
Because
Do you guys?
I felt like she had some figures, so I
Okay,
thought
and
she had
usually-
maybe seen
often
it,
there's
but
a-
we haven't.
She had like an idea of what the rent is, but she did not have a hard
the
copy.
reason I ask is often if somebody does a huge improvement in a space and then they move out, there's a cost to cancel the lease.
Yes, and that's what we've like, I have not seen in writing,
Yeah.
but that is what we've heard, that it would be, basically, there is not a way out of the lease, like it would be kind of the same as just paying the rent.
What were they planning on putting their road?
So it has been designed and built out as an early childhood, like pre-K, 3K, some earlier childhood stuff. So like some younger, that could potentially go, but those numbers are different, they're much smaller because of the ratios you need with like the very young children and because of the egress rate. That's the biggest thing affecting it is the egress ratios because it's upstairs, it's not at ground level.
Right.
So on the first floor, they are allowed to have very young children, but it's with very tight ratios because you need enough staff to egress infants or young children should that be necessary, right? So that's reasonable, like nobody's pushing back on
Yeah.
like endangering children, like that makes sense. I sent an email right after the walkthrough to the committee with all of the details of it. I'm gonna pull it up while we're in our meeting, just to refresh my memory. I do have photos. I actually should have planned ahead and screen shared a little, but I'm happy to pass my phone around. Just
Kristen?
Uh-huh.
I had a question, and I apologize if this has already been offered. Was there and is there an opportunity for the rest of the committee to do an on-site tour of the facility?
We can ask Gail. I have a feeling there might be additional walkthroughs, like often there are when we get closer to like the final proposal stages of what it can be. So, and I don't want to steal the superintendent's thunder, but Superintendent Samuels is coming from District 3. I guess he's on his way.
Yeah.
We wanted to hear tonight from the district superintendent about, because this is located in District 3 and Community Board 7, right? What District 3 best envisions for that space. We have also heard some competing ideas, right, from Gail's office that if
There
the
it
district
is,
doesn't
yep.
feel like it can utilize it completely or fully, you could potentially go with like a CBO type of partner because they often run early childhood, right? Like that's how a lot of our 3K and pre-K are done throughout the city. And especially, I believe, like the very young is all CBO stuff.
What does CBO stand for? again?
Community-based
Community-based
organization.
organizations.
That's
Okay.
actually like an acronym that's falling out of favor at the moment. There's another one that's more popular.
What's that?
Yeah,
I
don't know. I was thinking
I come across it in a lot of documents. I was like, oh, CBOs, I'm old with the CBO. But an example in this neighborhood would be like Bank Street College for Education does run some community-based education centers. We have had preschool centers come and talk to this committee before when there was a lot of contract problems for them. So for example, in pre-K or 3K, they might be contracted to do it, being that like they enroll the student in their small nursery of like 20 kids and they're paid by the city for that. So that is a potential way of using that space. It also is a very big space. It could be like chopped up in a bunch of different ways. However, has all the issues of chopping a space up, right? So perfect timing, because I was giving my very brief overview of what I know about the space at 1972.
Have you seen it? Have you been?
I did the walkthrough.
Oh, you were there
It
with
was
Daphne?
stunning. It really was. Like, been in a lot of school spaces and you're like, every school wants to be in this space. It was really nice, but it is definitely fully built out for young children. Like,
That's right.
it is not only like designed with flow for small children, it is furnished for pre-K and 3K, I guess, and potentially even younger. Like that's the furnishing that's in the space. So it has all the desks, all the chairs, all the whiteboards.
So it feels like there's a potential that like under the right circumstances, we could sort of.
I would
Open
think so.
doors.
My hope
Yeah.
is that we could have children in there for September.
Kristen, could you, if you get a chance, could you resend the email? I don't recall seeing it. I don't know that I got it or didn't, but I don't recall
I'll
it.
resend it, Richard, to the whole committee. I'll do
Thanks.
that well. I let Superintendent Samuel speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just, I think everyone here knows the superintendent for District 3 already, just in case you know. It's Kamar Samuels, and he gets to tell us what we really want to know is A, what the state of play is on that space now,
Mhm.
and B, what you guys see as the best use of it or potential use of it.
Yeah. All right. First, just a little bit of context about. Hi everyone. Kamar Samuels,
Hello.
District 3 Superintendent. I was here last to probably talk about some of the Mott Hall move and that took a long time, but recently was approved by the panel of education policy, so that will be moving ahead. So that's pretty exciting news, especially for, I believe, families looking for a high quality high school option, which we hope to expand into. But to the issue at hand, 1972 Broadway, typically for a school, let's say a K-5 school or a middle school, we would have been brought into the process a lot earlier if you're going to build a new building or a new school. You know, we would have been brought into the process where it's where you're choosing the paintings that are gonna and the furniture and all of that. That wasn't the case here because the certificate of occupancy is really for an early childhood center. I think it's 0 to 6, though it's on the second floor, and there's some question as to whether you could have 0 to 2 or toddlers on the second floor, right? And so there's some, and I don't really know as much about that because I don't have any schools that operate that way. So when I heard about, quite frankly, Gail is the one that brought this to my attention, that she does many things. Gail Rohr, and she brought this to our attention and we started asking questions. And the way this came about was under the de Blasio administration, when they were expanding pre-K and 3K seats across the city, there was a demand at the time for additional seats. Since then, we don't necessarily see the demand in the traditional way, in the certain terms of families who are in this area that are looking for 3K and pre-K seats. However, there are a lot of families who we know pay for early childhood and may, if given the option, would instead of pay come to a school like this or use an option like this. And so it was in that context, after talking to Gail, that I kind of really got involved and was on the walkthrough. Well, I wasn't there, but Daphne was on the walkthrough with you all. I've been really thinking about this in a number. I'd say I have a number of pathways that I'm beginning to kind of raise on the DOE side. Number one is, there has to be a decision of like, should this be a CBO that operates this building versus is it like a DOE building? Could it be a DOE partnership with a public-private kind of partnership? Looking at what are the opportunities for funding, in addition to what the DOE gives for pre-K, are there opportunities to look at special education seats, which is always kind of in demand. When we think about Head Start and the state and the federal government right now, and whether or not we can or can't depend on funding from them, or how that will be incentivized. So thinking about it from that purely early childhood space, right? And then also it goes up, the certificate of occupancy goes up until 6 years old, I think. So that includes like kindergarten, right? So in thinking about kindergarten, then we have begun to think about, are there needs in the district that it could kind of alleviate? So when we think about class size laws that are going to be changed, how that impacts our schools, will they need more space? We've started to think about, could this be for kindergarten, let's say an annex of a school, another, to kind of give us an additional option when it comes to space, right? So that there would be, one is a purely early childhood track, the other is, could we take a look at it for our space needs in that regard? And then the other one, which is a little bit more ambitious or takes a lot more thinking, is should we look at the space? Because yes, while it's furnished for early childhood and the toilets and so on are definitely early childhood. You could conceivably upgrade, make changes to that space and convert it to like, first you'd have to convert the certificate of occupancy as well as do the renovations, which take funding to do. But we are in a situation where this building is not the only such building in the city. Actually, there are other places that where it was planned, they built it within some kind of development, and no, they don't necessarily have the demand for 3K and pre-K seats that they thought they might have at the time that they were built. So we've seen, we know that there are other buildings.
I know that's not on you guys, but that's outrageous that they have been paying for these spaces that are completely built out around the city.
Is that surprising?
I find it surprising.
Can I just ask, you just mentioned a second ago that we're not seeing the demand potentially in some of these locations for 3K, pre-K. My understanding, just in some other conversations, that it seems that the demand is highest at the lowest levels of education in the city, from a public school perspective, and that it diminishes further along that track as we go. Is that still?
I think relatively that sounds about right. I think there are several factors why we don't see the demand, like birth rates, as well as like folks moving out of the city, and like it's just we're just in a different place than we were prior to. But generally speaking, attrition works throughout degrees, right? Like a typical school, if you're a K-8 school, you might lose.
One thing you said, Superintendent Samuels, that is intriguing is the population that may be utilizing or in demand is paying. I remember being one of those parents paying for preschool, and wanting or needing the option not to pay.
Yeah,
especially in this.
Yes.
Area.
So, and that's why I said the question of demand is also wrapped up in a question of a perception of quality as well, right? So for folks who can afford to pay or can just afford to pay, they might be making a decision based on what they think of it as a quality program. And we're saying, and I think this is kind of Gail's position on this, it's like, and I would say my own too, it's like, if you can provide a public option that will meet that demand for
need,
quality,
depending on who
then
you
we
partner
should,
with.
then, right,
Yeah.
and then we should be able to, we should look into that, and we should try to do that, and that's kind of part of what that conversation looks like in the DOE.
Is there a demand for older, for K through 5 seats?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, is there a demand for K through 5 seats in the district? In other words, if we went the route of retrofitting the space, what would the population look like, and is there a demand for that?
We were to?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the question, so I'll address that question in two ways. Number one is there a demand for K through 5 seats? I would say the general answer would be yes. However, with and I would say also yes, and with the potential of the class size law, you'll find like a reduction of seats, right? So you will see that demand kind of tick up. And also we have in this, we're specifically talking about Lincoln Square area, like up to 79th Street. We see significant demand, in particular from families who live outside of the zone, like that actually ensure that the demand remains high, right? So if you go to 199, or if you think of like PS9, 199, significant numbers of those families are actually coming from outside of the zone. They might be within the district, but they're not. They'll come from the 75 zone, more north of all the way up to Harlem. They'll come down to school. So if you then have fewer seats, you're gonna have fewer. I mean, math-wise, you have fewer seats for families outside of the zone, and therefore the demand is going to continue to be relatively high. When I talked about though retrofitting, I wasn't only thinking about K through 5. I was thinking of all the way to middle school, right? So when we think of where we see the adjustments that need to be made when the class size mandates get implemented, you're talking about co-located spaces, right, with middle schools in particular. So you think of a place like PS9 and Center School is the first thing that comes to mind. They're the building that's most is most at risk of like having this be a serious disruption, because the demand for PS9 remains high, the demand for Center School remains high. So like what can we do? So there's that was a part of that ideas that came up, but again, I think that's like a longer term, and that would not be something that would be in play for September. No. So when we're thinking about September, which I kind of fall on the side of, like I want to do it. I don't want to sit here and have you tell me we're spending money on this room, the school,
big, beautiful empty space. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of pushing for that end in the DOE, like as soon as possible, with something as sensible as possible, talking to partners around how we could about opportunities for offering that kind of quality program.
I have a few. Oh, Ira, go ahead. You were waiting.
I have one question. As you're working on the idea that the economic projections either remain flat or continue on an upslope. So as long as we don't watch the news or read it, that's an accurate
economic projection. I always say, yeah. I'm not. You make me sound like a business guy, but yeah, that's
the other thing is I'm surprised to hear that, having done a lot of that work for the SCA as a private architect, to hear that they made this a suitable only for early childhood Because usually their premise is we can put anybody in any
That's right.
space, and all we have to do is change the furniture
Mhm,
and maybe lower a chalkboard or whiteboard as we might have today or whatever.
mhm.
So I'm surprised to hear that it was made that specific.
Yeah, and I would say it was a unique time in the city where the pre-K for all and 3K for all was really the messaging and really the priority of the administration. So yeah, I agree with you that typically, right, like a building, when you get to the frame, then you start making decisions, but yeah.
They would tell us, yes, you're designing it as a middle school,
That's
but it
right.
could be a high school, it could be an
That's right.
PS, and we're gonna tell you the day we finish.
That's right.
But the other thing is that it shouldn't take that long to even retrofit the kind of thing you're talking about here, because if you look at what they did to Ascension,
Yeah, I knew that would come back on me at some point, but I'll say,
This is in a private space.
again, yes, and I think it was, I think then again, if you take that space, I think that was like a real priority of the chancellor to get that done for families who were vulnerable and so on. And so I agree with you, and then like I am not as optimistic about the economics for funding coming to like retrofit a building as I am for that students will be coming to our school. I'll leave, that's not necessarily.
The
up to
flip
me.
side of this is, I think we're very fortunate there have been no investigative reporters around this.
I mean,
So
And
what
of
kept
course,
saying-
none of
We're
us,
not, it's the
Right.
city that is
right, but
fortunate,
the
yeah.
good news is that none of
come
us
on, we're
share
all on the same
responsibility.
team here.
None of us
Yes.
have any
Right.
involvement in the responsibility for the creation of this
right.
situation. It is
That's right.
purely within the
That's
city
right.
hall.
I do want to address just a few things about retrofitting it. It is in the realm of possibility, but it would be pretty big because some of the things, aside from being like younger children bathrooms, which is always.
That's actually easy.
Yeah, Jim.
There's not a cafeteria that's appropriate, like it's just a grab and go to deliver food to the rooms. So they need
You
to
can do it.
build that
You
out.
can still
Or,
do it.
yeah, but people, we have schools that function with that,
Yeah.
but I think the gym space, so the lack
Is a
of
problem.
outdoor space, the lack of gyms, the gym space is not
Yeah.
good. I mean, it's not that far from Central Park, but still, the lack of outdoor space, all of that, like, it is certainly not an ideal
I was
You're
spot
to
for,
say that.
for.
Yeah,
for
parents
a
would
middle
definitely
school.
question that.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember there's zero outdoor
Okay,
space.
well,
Yeah.
that's, but these are things that are
Are
not
surmountable.
unusual. We are
That's right.
trying to move
That's right.
the system away from these buildings, not add these kind of buildings.
That's-
Yeah.
On the other hand, there are a lot of things to be said for this building.
That's right. This building,
So
I mean,
it's-
I was a principal of a middle school. I visited the building and I might have been like, you know what? I'll take it because I'll make it
I'll
work
figure it out.
because of all the other like wonderful people, but it is not an ideal.
Yeah. I have some questions going back to the pre-K, 3K, early childhood stuff. Yeah, Office of Intergovernment Affairs or someone else from like planning was pretty dismissive, like District 3 doesn't have demand. We put more 3K and pre-K in, we don't need it.
Yeah.
So where did we put more 3K and pre-K in first?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming they're full. Are they not full?
Yeah. So a couple. All right. So last year, at the end of the year, we had a lot of political pressure, if you will, to expand seats.
Yeah.
And so we looked at schools, and it was, in some cases, we added 3K seats, and we looked at them and added 3K seats, we might have removed a pre-K seat and so on. We added, I think, 12 across the district, new classrooms, yeah,
that's a
and
lot.
we added a lot across the district, but it went all the way up onto Harlem, or maybe the goal is so we got to 9, but I can give you the. No, it's all.
Is it
No
perfect?
Yeah, no worries. So I think that I can get you the exact number, but I think maybe we had a goal to get 12, we got to 9, but well, one place we did add a lot, it was PS 145 because we had the, yeah, I know. God.
You certainly had a lot of space.
Inside joke over there.
Yeah.
No, so we had the re-siding of West Prep, which
Right.
created more
Oh.
rooms in 145, so we have to add, I think, 3 rooms there. We added some classrooms at 452, 191, and in Harlem. So right, so we went on a significant we did significant outreach to principals to make sure we had the space, everything that was that we had the space, the bathrooms, everything. So we did a lot of work around that. And so, but when they do talk about demand, like that's why I'm going back to this idea that yes, it's if I am hell bent on the fact that I need a free option or a pre-K option, a free pre-K option, and I'm falling just below that line where I can make it work to pay for something,
Right.
then we would see that. Then that's how the DOE is going to, that's the pool of folks that like really speaks to the demand. Now, there's another piece of this which when we talk about the folks who are paying, many of those programs are under significant pressure as well, right? So if you add a new free option, you might be putting,
Cutting these small.
a small
organizations,
organization that, run by a synagogue or run by, so a CBO, you're gonna put significant pressure on them too, right? If you open this shiny new thing right here. And so all of those, I am sympathetic to that. I wouldn't say I would not do this because of that, all right? So just to kind of put it all on the table there.
Because you might just take those people who are already in one organization and just move them into the free one, and not total addition. The net out is nearly the same, which is it's an interesting risk.
Yeah, it's like a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
On some level.
And I've also seen early childhood centers like in Brooklyn with a lot, like a whole old high school, right, full of pre-K seats. Are they sometimes kindergarten as well? Like if you did an early childhood center, what would the age group bracketing be?
Yeah, so I believe a typical early childhood center goes through pre-K and then kindergartners go to the primary school.
Yeah.
But I believe we could do, if it was a DOE run one, we could also do kindergarten.
Right.
In that building.
Because then, I don't know how many kindergarten classrooms are in like 190 and 191, but.
199.
199,
yeah,
sorry.
And so the 199, I mean, again.
Because they're both pretty close there. 452 is very close there as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I think, the need there, like I said, the need is really at, PS9 or a school like that, which is farther away, right? Which kind of creates another, if it's 5 siblings, 80, so that's why what puts the pressure on space is co-location.
Yeah.
Right, so 199 is a standalone building, 191 standalone, 452 standalone, 87 standalone, all relatively decent sized schools, big schools. 190 is PS9 is a co-located building. Anderson is a co-located, those places with co-located, with a co-location is where you're gonna see the pressure come from when we have expanded, class size.
By the way, historic note, when you were doing the rezoning back in year 1, and 199 was pushing the fact that they were overcrowded. I actually did an analysis nobody took any attention to, which showed that the 199 building was only slightly more overcrowded than the PS9 building.
I didn't ignore it. I remember that.
And it was just ignored because 199
was a lot louder.
had,
They wanted Central School to be moved.
Sorry?
Because they wanted Central School to be moved.
No, not that move, the one after that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one that split Lincoln Towers.
Yeah, the rezoning, not
Yeah.
the,
That rezoning,
not the
yeah.
physical.
But the
the
problem
rezoning.
was that the capacity, the overcapacity at 199 was not that much different than the one,
Yeah.
than one,
Makes sense.
the 9
Nine.
slash
Right.
center.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yes.
And,
Yeah.
and the thing was, in the original move of center into the not PS9 building, was PS9 was supposed to get certain classrooms back from center that they never got. I assume you might not be aware of this, and if you are, my apologies.
No, I'm aware of some of
Guess
the
how many
remnants.
kids
of
I
it.
was sent through PS9?
Well, we were both on the PS9 board.
Yeah, so I mean, the great news is that we have two leaders there that are super collaborative and try their best to kind of make that space work. They have one room in question that every year I get a question that both of them come to me, and really PS9 is this, it uses that room now, but yes, so far, given what we have, we're in a good place. I think it will, if something has to give, right? If we're looking at the class size, either we cap 9 and taking fewer students from outside of the zone, or
I can't believe it takes an any from outside of the zone.
no, right, because you
Well,
don't,
because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
right, because you don't
exactly.
realize the loss
Yeah,
of enrollment that the city has
Yeah.
seen and the impact of that. And then, I mean, obviously that has trickle effects throughout the rest of
Yeah.
the district. So if I'm not going to, and then I'm
It's
not gonna
taking
go to
kids from some
75,
other
I'm
school,
not going to
yeah.
this one, yeah. But it's market forces, you know.
yeah.
Yeah, so just to go back to 1972.
Yeah.
Um,
Not
Yeah,
to
yeah.
hear, not to hear.
But,
That could be fun.
so,
I wouldn't be having a conversation. I wouldn't be here.
so that, like, what are the next steps that you're looking to take? You know, I know, on one hand, I think a lot of us would probably be excited at the opportunity to open anything
Yeah.
in the fall, because that's always exciting.
Right.
But of course, there's a lot of district needs that you'd like your consideration. So like, can you just let us know kind of where you are in that process and
Yeah, so I saw the building for the first time, when was it, on Tuesday? And I've been having conversations. I think we have sometimes scheduled with the, we're getting time with the Deputy Chancellor of Early Childhood to, she's well aware of the issue, to kind of hear her thoughts, because she would be critical in thinking about like who is going to manage the space, right? So she's going to do an outside organization and she has something in mind. If not, there's but I believe her position will remain, Kamar, we don't know what to do. We don't have the seats. We don't have the demand, right? I think that's going to be kind of her position, I anticipate, but and then we'll talk about the ideas we have, and then we'll have to, I think there's a significant level of urgency to try to figure out what we do, because I think everybody is aware of the potential of an investigative reporter.
Well, to piggyback off of that question.
So I think, I just think it's a joint decision with obviously my input, with Deputy Chancellor input, and ultimately the Chancellor, but we'll have to go with something, like the things that we're thinking about.
Okay, that was my question, Kamar. Like, how much input would you have?
Yeah, I mean,
Influence,
You don't get
input.
to run it all?
no, I mean, I don't want to overstate my input, but I would have significant input on.
So one place we started, or at least I started thinking when we were thinking about early childhood, was special education, because the one part of early childhood that seems to have a lot of demand and not sufficient seats is special education. And I understand that that might mean drawing from a wider geographic area than ideal, because you don't want young kids to have to travel a lot. But I also know if you're not getting the services, families are willing to travel, because that's the priority. But the kids get the
Busing
services.
is a
not
possibility.
It could be beyond district.
Right, because like Mickey Mantle is,
But they have early childhood at Mickey Daniel? That's
I don't
District
know,
No,
but
I don't think
seventy-five.
That's
Right.
DC, so he's thinking
Yeah.
of the 75, but there is like, there are inclusion programs, there are several types of programs at early childhood level that we could really look at. I think you're right, that special education, I think I did mention that is one of the avenues that we should be thinking about as well. Because there's demand throughout the city.
Yeah.
And you're right to say that it wouldn't, then you can think of beyond District 3. And that's, I mean, you can have both, right? You can have the program serving District 3 families. And then also like but then like I said, we have to think about the funding that's attached to some of these programs and where all that is. But yes, I think
Yeah.
special education has been a priority in my thinking
Right.
about it too.
Yeah, just because that's where I think.
in a
There's a
space,
gap
I mean,
in what
I
the
haven't
city's
personally
providing.
been there, but I've saw the pictures.
Just trust it, it's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, I've seen the pictures, and I
Okay.
think ideally for special education, having that type of space would be ideal.
Mhm.
Not to say, those students who are not, special needs, but I mean, just thinking about young children in a space like that with special needs, it
And we-
would be ideal.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's not mutually exclusive, right? So I think any space that you're gonna occupy in this current, and when we think about it has to be an inclusive space that should serve students with special needs at high level. So
Yeah.
and one of the things about.
and it's also accessible in a way that many of our buildings
Right.
are.
I know.
Yeah.
That's why
right,
for
exactly, I
Mickey
was thinking
Mantle, I
that.
can't
Yeah.
picture that Mickey Mantle was
Mm.
accessible to.
I haven't,
But it
it's not
is,
one
it
of
must be. I haven't been in there, but it's-
I was in there for a community meeting.
I go there to vote.
When,
Oh, that's up to, well, they,
Syndrome, was city council before Gail.
Howard.
Sorry. And the other, and then also the Nest Plus program
Mhm.
That's what I was
Wait,
thinking.
yeah,
ASD now.
is also,
Absolutely, that's that's one of the things I'm
Just so
thinking.
that everyone knows what the ASD Nest program is, maybe you can describe it better than I can, but I think that it's not, there's only 2 of them, I believe, in the whole of Manhattan, and District 3 has 1.
Yeah, it's 75 and obviously also that articulates into West Prep, and then there's one,
way
I think.
uptown.
Yeah, but I think there's one in high school, I think in MLK, I think they might have one or third. But to your point, in terms of, there's always demand for the seats in that school, but in this case, we would have to also find an articulation pattern for that
Right.
school as well.
Exactly.
It would be early childhood, but yeah, I think, and we also have the program at 199.
What's the program at 199?
What's it called again? It's the ACE.
The ACEs.
It's the ACEs program, yeah, where
Which is what?
they have, it's also for students that are on the spectrum or students, but it's, they possibly could have like, they typically, it's not students with like behavioral needs, but it's I think it's like a 6-to-1 program. It's not like
Okay.
and it's like, and also in that program, it's the only one in Manhattan actually, and then we do have kids coming from Brooklyn going into that
Right.
program. So yeah,
And for those
different.
2, like, that you just mentioned, the ACEs and the ASD Nest, both of those start at kindergarten or
Kindergarten.
1st grade?
for
Kindergarten.
ours, it starts at
kindergarten.
So that would be an articulation if you had the, like, 3K.
Yeah, I don't
Pre-K,
need that,
pre-K,
we, those
then
come
go
to
to
us
the
at
schools.
turning 5, at what they call it, turning 5
Yeah.
stuff. Those come to us then. I don't know what it, so.
Where they were before.
Yeah,
the
exactly. So
turn
I
five
have to
process.
figure out
Yeah.
what that would look like. So that's kind
Yeah.
of part of the conversation with the deputy chancellor too. I think she'll know a little bit more of that landscape.
Right.
And then,
Kirsten, can I just make an observation?
Go ahead.
To me, we've heard a lot of alternatives for the space. And the only, and we've heard that there is no need or very little need for the pre-K It's like three and pre-K, unless we draw students from other schools, which may result in the demise of these other schools. So that it would be a net, I don't know, be a net loss, but it certainly it would not be a net gain, other than the fact that some parents might save a little money. I would think that is the least attractive alternative. We've heard a lot of ideas tonight, and maybe a mixed use for the school is appropriate if we can think about it. I think bringing kids from out of the district makes a lot of sense if the need isn't here for the district. But I think the least attractive thing to do is to give in to the fact that it's already fitted out for these younger kids, and that's how we're going to use it. If it takes another year to retrofit it to its best use, I think it's worth it.
I'm just gonna respond to that quickly because I chaired the middle school committee for 8 years at CEC3, so I know the middle school landscape quite well in this district. And that is worth exploring, but that would take a lot of exploration because as you can imagine, if you move one middle school, it has huge knock-on effects across the whole district because middle schools are not zoned, right? Children apply to and can go to any middle school in the district. And if there are seats, they actually even come from out of the district. So that is worth exploring, but that's a big exploration. It's not as easy as like just move school A to space Y.
I think, if we took off the table hypothetically the need to bring in the younger kids because that's how the school is fitted, and did some brainstorming about a mixed grouping of students where there is a need, we could come up with something that makes sense. And once we start the program for the younger kids and put these other businesses and the other programs out of business, we're stuck. That's what it's going to be forever. And it may not be the best use for that space.
Right. My one, I guess, point to that is, I don't want to be dismissive of the saving of a couple dollars, right? Like, I don't want to be like pre-K actually costs a lot of money, and folks are spending like college type money for it. I don't want to be but I hear the point completely to say, as certainly as a thought, as a design exercise, we could say, let's just say we don't do this, like, so that we can like really robustly explore some of the time, because I think you're right, Richard, that because we have this right in front of us, and then we're worried about the cost of like retrofitting. We don't sometimes explore it as like deeply as probably we should. So I'm taking it, and I think we should do that. And I'm saying, pre-K costs a lot of money.
I would be more sensitive to the cost factor if we were talking about a building in Harlem or East Harlem. We're talking about a building in Lincoln Square. But most of the people who live around there are well able to afford to pay.
Richard, I think you're putting a lot of prejudice into this here. I think at the end of the day, it's great that the city is finally paying attention to this. Let's start there. Opening any school of any level, I think, is a good thing. I don't think we should let the great get in the way of the good.
That's right.
Right. So I think, to me, as a resident that lives near this space specifically, as someone who is going down these paths of parenthood and all of that, like, I think the more the better, not just for me selfishly, but I think for the community generally. And like the idea that we could open something in September is exciting, but I also understand that the need to explore try to get the best possible. So I appreciate that conversation is happening. I want to start there. I think that being said, I don't think it's appropriate to like geographically assume that people in different districts or different parts of the district can afford things. If someone here wants to give me $40,000 a year for private childcare, they're more than happy to do it. Richard, you can put your name on the top of that list if you want. But I understand that there's a lot of different demands.
Yeah.
So I think this is a space that we know is that it has sat vacant for a while, or sat furnished for a while. I think if there's an opportunity to open something quickly, that's worth exploring. I think if there's an opportunity to, with minimal impact and delay, get something set, whether it's for special needs students, whether it's for kids of different age groups, that's all like worth exploring. I'm happy that we're doing it, but I think it's also, you know, I will voice the perspective of someone that may use a facility like this, and also provide the perspective of peers of mine who are in the same position, which is that they feel the frustration of wanting more resources as taxpayers in New York City to tax-funded options and not having to go a total private route when those childcare costs are often $30,000 to $40,000.
Sure.
I agree, and I'm gonna be biased to District 3. I'm always gonna be biased to where I live and where my kids have come from. Looking outside of the district, I think that should be a last option. I think there's enough, more than enough, children in this district, on the Upper West Side, who could benefit from this. So I'm definitely, you know, going for and gonna advocate for those families that live here on the Upper West Side before, and even Harlem, you know, before I say, oh, you know, DOE should open it up to Brooklyn or, you know, even District 2. Because for a long time, you know, we've had battles with D2 not wanting to play fair. So we really need to, this space is right here in the heart of the Upper West Side, and I think these families, there's more than enough families that are in need and who don't, you know, who can't maybe afford to pay or who don't want to pay. You know, everyone's situation is different. So having an option for these families that live in our community is ideal in my eyes.
And from a data perspective, just like the average median income, I think in that area, I believe is somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 a year. I think it's closer to 80. So a $30,000 to $40,000 a year cost for childcare is a substantial amount of someone's money. Other people that live in this neighborhood that have salaries much higher and incomes, of course, but I think it's.
I mean, your salaries are going to what? Childcare if you have children and rent. That's it.
Yeah.
So
when you consume 50%
right
for rent and then bring the other 50% toward this, what's left? So I think this is a win for the community, no matter what goes on there. And I'm happy that we are exploring this.
No, this has really been good for me to be a part of and hear. I think it's crystallizing some of the priorities in my mind as I have the conversations and at Central that I know are gonna kick up in the next couple of weeks and probably for the next month. So this is really super helpful.
Oh,
I will say though,
I just want to know.
I want to add something. Hi. I'm actually not on this committee.
Oh, okay.
But she is on the community.
I'm on the community board. My mother was a public school teacher for
Yay,
40
Mom.
years in New York and 10 years in Chicago. But I sit on the housing committee. And I want to piggyback on what has just been said, but talking about affordability. So people come to our committee and they talk, young people, and they talk about how they're leaving New York with crying, weeping in this very room because they can't afford to stay in this district, but they want to live in this district. And the principal reasons they leave are housing and childcare, or schools, childcare / schools. And I'm not so old that I don't remember what that felt like. Whether or not you can school your children, moving around to try and get yourself into the right catchment district, whatever you want to call it. You know, am I going to quit my job to take care of my kids because I can't afford to school them? All that business. And so this is a part of the larger package of how we keep people in the city and don't lose them to other parts of the state or other states altogether. And we are losing people. And if we want our you know, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, community board colleagues to stay here, what you're doing is precisely what we need to be doing to keep this community vibrant. So it's not just about housing. We talk about affordable housing a lot, but it's gotta be the entire package of what it takes to be a part of this community. And so this is, I think, critically important.
Thanks for saying it. I will say that, well, when I became superintendent almost 3 years ago now, but the chancellor, this administration stressed exactly what you talked about. And despite some of the issues that come up with it, there, we talk about equity issues and so on, but their push was, we need to keep kids keep families in our schools and keep families in our system. We did kind of some market research on this and focus groups, and it showed, the results from the survey showed recent schooling and childcare was high up on, because we actually surveyed families who got an offer from a kindergarten offer from us that didn't come and that left. So we kind of tracked them down and said, hey, why didn't you show up at our schools? Or and the cost of the perception of school is part of it, but a big part of it was like, we left the city, and part of it was the cost of childcare for our younger ones and that kind of stuff. So we're seeing that exactly. And our goal is to, which is why, again, and a lot of my conversations with Gail and others are about, these are the kinds of families that we want to stay in the system.
Kumar, just real quick, sorry. Just the thought of, pre-K and then bringing it up to kindergarten in this space. Has there been any thought of a dual language?
In the pre-K setting, so we think of dual language. We have dual language programs through our elementary schools. I mean, that I haven't specifically thought of dual language in this particular space, but that's something we could think about too, if they're, try to figure out if there's a demand there, because we do have pre-K dual language programs. But I wanted to push you on something before though. Would you have an issue? We talked about students with special needs. Would you have an issue if those students were coming from outside of the district, or
no? I'm an IEP parent member, so
just want to make sure.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we're definitely fully on the same.
Yeah. I was just Jamie, just to your point from earlier, and I don't want to belabor it too much, but I think the conversations that you were talking about people having that maybe you may have gone through, or exactly the conversations I've had with my wife, where it's, hey, we make X amount.
Yeah.
It's not worth it for me to keep working to just pay for someone else to watch my kid. Yeah. At that point, I just stay and watch my child. Yeah. And then we have these conversations too of, God
forbid you have two.
Well, yeah, no.
Then you're like, oh,
shoot. We had three. Our answer was that while that second paycheck went entirely to childcare, the issue was keeping both parents viable in the job market.
Of course. And
now, the other thing that happened to us was, and this is why we might lose kindergarten families, is there are break points like fifth grade, and even if your kid gets into kindergarten, your younger kid gets into kindergarten, you then have to look at what happens with the middle school, or similarly, if you have somebody going to high school and somebody on the cusp of going to high school, which is a much, by the way, having just been through the high school admissions process for the third time, college once, and middle school 3 times, the high school is the singularly worst.
That's why families leave.
Really becomes the exit point for a lot of families.
I think probably, I imagine every point.
Because
that's where we are too, because it's like, it's not just the cost, it's like the conversation is, not only do we stay in this community, do we leave New York City?
Right.
It's like, here I am, like, I'm a young member of, member of this community, like trying to be active in the community. I'd like to think that hopefully I'm someone that folks want around, but the feeling is like, can I even afford to be here? So
because realistically, you're looking at the trajectory.
Yeah, of course.
You're looking at what you have to go through in this system.
But it's probably at every point. It's the early childhood, it's the pre-K, kindergarten,
and the space that you get when you leave the city, and
if you can make it here.
I'm a lifelong New Yorker, so I'm not so sensitive with space or anything like that.
Right.
I don't want, but I understand that. But I think, again, it's, these are conversations that people in this community are having.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question that has less to do with this particular topic, but related to special needs?
Sure.
So and Kristen knows where I'm about to go. So I'm deeply concerned about special needs children and the cuts to DOE in Washington. I'm concerned, wait, let me just back up. I'm concerned about the cuts to DOE and the pending elimination of the department. But I'm most immediately concerned about the impact it will have on special needs children. And by the way, I guess I'll just tag on to civil rights today, the elimination of civil rights offices across the city. Are you comfortable talking about any aspect of that? Or am I putting you too much on the spot?
I mean, that maybe you have to stop me. Sometimes I go too far. I don't know. I think I'm pretty comfortable. I'm pretty comfortable. It's fine. No, I think I'm pretty comfortable. Don't let me second.
We as a committee, I'm not on this committee, like I said, but we would like to talk amongst ourselves about how we might lean into it. But it's hard to know what a community board or even a city can do about a major federal.
Right, and that's essentially, I am comfortable talking about it because in some ways there's not that much to talk about for me, from my vantage point. Some of this is, obviously the federal government makes up about 5% of our budget. 5% is $2 billion in our consideration. You can't find $2 billion. Maybe Richard can find it for us, but you can't find $2 billion. And the folks that are most vulnerable are our students with special needs and our students who receive free and reduced lunch or And so there is no question that this is an issue. I think more so than I think the funding is going. I think what I worry about is not whether or not there's going to be our funding is going to get cut or not. I think it's what's going to be the incentives or how we get that funding. So I think you're going to find that even today you heard the federal government is asking the state to identify schools that are not doing the DEI stuff. Like that's where they're going to not, the funding is going to be attached to strings, right? I think that's what's pretty scary about the situation. So that's kind of like where I am.
To throw in an extraneous fact, New York City might be 5%. I read Mississippi is 28%. So
Yes. Say no more.
We're in a relatively good position, but still,
but
5% is still.
But the question, but the problem is like the strings attached to their 28% would be probably the same as our strings, and they would probably be happy to
get rid of those.
You can cut the science classes, you can cut the reading classes.
But you mentioned earlier.
So anyway, so that's my worry. I mean, I share the same worry, but it's really like, what is the environment going to look like? And like you see what's happening at Columbia and like what you sign up for.
You mentioned earlier, and I promise this is my last question because I keep saying I'm not on this committee, but I'm taking over the meeting. You mentioned earlier in connection with children with special needs, possibly some more partnerships with private. Is this the time to re-engage that kind of thinking around partnerships with private?
Sure, in this particular space I was talking.
Which gets us back to the.
Yeah.
Space is actually private.
Thank you for bringing
so,
back to the actual space, because we're leasing the space, right?
Yeah.
So in thinking about what you said though, yes, I think in any conversation, it's good to have to bring up private partnerships, because some of our private folks will tell us that the district, what the DOE gives as like the per pupil funding for that pre-K and 3K is not enough for what they, to run a comparable program
Right.
for what they offer. And so that's why it's gonna have to be some kind of partnership.
Are there models like that? Like, I know we co-locate spaces a lot, right? Like particularly with charter schools, but are there any that are like a partnership, let's say,
Yeah.
in this sort of place where the DOE is footing the rent bill, which is what happens with charter schools, right? And then the CBO or
No,
the
yeah,
charter is
I-
within that.
I'm not, it's like.
Right, it's a,
another-
that's a very
it's
weedy
yeah, it's
question.
another question
Yeah.
about like, that's when we're talking internally about the possibilities.
Right.
See if there's other folks out there that do anything like that, but also the other part is, you know, just like you do at PS 87 or PS 9 or wherever, it's like, you know, just the school gets fair student funding, but then PTAs raise money and all, so we could be looking at something like that as well.
Right,
You know, instead of the 40 grand you pay, you can give 10.
right.
No,
Yeah.
You know, I know, I know.
Yeah,
Because I think it's all good, like,
Yeah,
right,
I think we, like, this is a great committee in that, like, you know, we're talking about education and kids and libraries, like,
we do good things.
these are
right?
all like great things about our communities, our societies, our governments, like, so there, it's a win no matter what.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm, like I said, I want to keep stressing, like, I'm happy that we're talking
Yeah.
about it, that you're thinking about it, that we're hopefully, you know, there's news.
so right, so
You know,
let's
some
talk
have
about,
nice
I think, I
response.
mean, I would say, just to put ourselves on, like, I should try to come back maybe early May or something, Wednesday or May meeting.
Yeah, and we're like the third Thursday
In
of the
May?
month.
So
Yeah.
maybe we'll have, I'll give you, you know,
Because-
progress update as to where we are.
Right, because if we're aiming for September,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
third Thursday in June, I know, like, public schools are a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
busy, and it's
Listen,
a little late.
I'm a
like-
12-month guy,
Yeah.
you know. it's-
Well,
Don't tell
Yeah,
any
yeah.
principal that last
Yeah,
like
yeah.
week of June.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
it's horrible. For a principal, it's actually the last part of June is the worst part of the year. For
We have
teachers,
no
it's great.
time for you.
well, Kumar, if this is targeted and realistically, if this is targeted for September,
I think it's an ambitious goal, to be quite
Okay.
frank, but
We have ambitious goals.
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah,
happy
oh,
with
trust
it,
me.
but
I've been called ambitious several times since
Yeah, I
I've gotten
know.
here.
I know, and you've been doing a great job, you know,
Well,
on your
thank
team.
you. But yeah, so I am trying to put, I mean, yeah, I think you raise the urgency if you say September. Yeah, at the very least, that's like an urgent conversation to have, and I
Yeah.
think it's possible, like, they've done it before, so that's.
But my question is, if that is the goal.
Yeah.
Getting the word out.
Yeah, yeah.
Getting the word out.
It's because, yeah.
That is problematic, and obviously we missed.
I'm sorry, but
Yes,
I had
but
to
it's so
check.
true.
Yeah.
Already closed for
Right.
pre-K for next year, so everyone who went through the regular application thing, that's done already. Have they gotten their matches
I
already?
don't think so. No,
But anyhow-
actually,
No,
I know
they've
that.
had
They
to.
have not.
They
No,
have
no,
it.
they haven't gotten matches.
But they will certainly have
Yeah,
that
76.
by
Yeah.
by
Pre-K
the end
families
of
have
June.
not. Oh, geez, yes.
Realistically, if we don't come to some direction in the next few months, it's gonna roll over to the next mayoral term.
I was like, it's a whole nother year
Hey,
too,
can you
but
stop
you're right.
making my?
Whoever or whatever the mayor is,
Yeah,
That's
but
a whole
that
nother.
is
I re-
very realistic, because what the
No, it's-
political will is, but also this is a prime example of the sort of thing that
That-
falls
yeah, in the
through the
transition.
cracks in the
Mhm.
transition between
Between
administrations.
administrations.
'Cause
Yes.
everyone in this administration swears they never heard of this space.
And then with
And the
with
outgoing
this
administration
administration,
approved
everyone's
it.
leaving every second, so trying to keep up with who's who is the
Yeah.
other thing. And then you're on a new election.
No, you're about to
Yeah,
get me.
Yeah.
But, I know my limits here. I know my limits here.
Consistency,
Yeah,
So
so.
it is real to say the change of administrations, no
Yes.
matter who is
Yes.
there,
Yes.
is a
Well,
potential inflection point for any project like
We'll
this.
have elected officials that will
Right.
Yeah,
remain through, and having Gail
And
as
we'll-
not,
and we'll
is the
be,
biggest
yeah,
thing.
hopefully,
Yeah,
No, I said,
It's
hopefully
not-
I'm here. like,
yeah, I
who knows,
heard that. I
If
heard
there's
that you're
a-
gonna be here.
Yeah. All right, cool.
all
All
right,
right,
I think
so
that
I
is it.
think
Thank
we
you so
should
much.
look for May to kind of come back.
Yeah, it's May 15th.
Okay, great.
But we
So
can
May
always
15th,
like,
okay.
my
Last
committee
question.
loves, I just move the meeting. if
Okay.
we
One
need
last
to.
question for you. Okay, since those of us who don't follow the PEP religiously,
Great, yeah.
what was the final conclusion
Oh.
of that?
I was there, I testified. You took my
You
mom
were
home?
there, yes,
Of
that's
course,
right,
you
that's
know,
right, that's
Lalo
right,
called
that's
me.
right.
That's my baby's
All right.
middle school.
So I'm happy you were there. I was there. I had to recuse myself because my daughter goes to school at 165 and
Yeah.
there was like, anyway, I used my meeting here to say like, guys, this was not my idea. And I think I remember you saying they had come up with this
That
several years
potential
ago.
plan for
Yeah.
moving Mount Hall was many years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
Like literally.
So
it
I was like,
Twin
I was
Falls,
at a community board.
Four superintendents
Yeah.
before Eileen.
Eileen?
But Eileen
I don't
really
remember
pushed
that
it,
far
yeah.
back.
Yeah, so I said, it's not, but anyway, so it was an ambitious plan. It really, at the heart of it was giving access to families in Harlem to have within our superintendency a high quality standalone middle school option. And in that, what developed out of it was this idea that the high school process is so fraught, is a good word. And so what did he say? Yeah. And so the idea to expand Mount Hall into a 6 through 12 IB program was came to be, and we had significant conversations in our Harlem working group with all of the schools, and in a difficult way we came to do that, as well as to propose that, as well as to truncate the middle school grades of MS 180. And also in doing that, we were going to recite the District 75 program that's co-located with PS 76 to 180, so that they would now have a more accessible building. We would have only elementary school in that building, and but essentially what it called for was the truncation, or just essentially that PS 76 would essentially be closed for this to happen. There's no, Harlem, there's under-enrolled schools, but because of co-locations, again, there's no real space to do a lot of this kind of adjustment. So the PEP eventually, this was supposed to be, it was on the PEP for October, but then the chancellor changed and all that kind of stuff. It kept getting delayed. So in March, the PEP voted to approve the proposal to move forward. So we're now in the process. We're seeing what was difficult with the delay was that it came out. We're trying to, speaking of September,
That's right.
we're trying to start a high school in September, and that's why the idea of this word of mouth thing, and like, so families were asked to apply to a school that didn't exist, right? So and so the offers had
Thank God
come
they
out,
got 12
and
chances.
so
More.
no,
Unlimited.
you have more, but the
Unlimited.
offers came out before so we couldn't so families were able to apply, but we couldn't make an offer.
Oh, but you couldn't make
Because
an offer.
the
right,
school
so
didn't
there's
exist.
a school, right.
So once the PEP approved the process, so we then had to, so if you put Mahal as your first choice, we then had to like engage you and say, okay, no, it's a real thing, like, and so several families, we put, I think we had like 290 applications. Somewhere put somewhere, so those people were all put on the wait list, and now we have, I think up to, in a short time, where we have up to like 55 accepted offers now, and like, so Marlon is super dynamic.
Got his
He's
video
out
out
there.
there.
He's got his video out and
It's
everything.
like, I was in awe. I shared it on social media.
But
And so-
it's risky for those families, because
Yeah.
if you accept that offer, you are therefore not on the wait list
Right,
for
right.
anybody else. If
Right,
that school
right,
isn't
right,
there in
right, right,
September,
right, exactly.
suddenly you're.
Yeah.
So
at the bottom of the
now
pile.
they got the offers now, so the school is a thing, and so we're now having, and we're really doing strong outreach to first of all, the folks in my hall that are in the 8th grade,
That's
the
great.
folks in the 8th grades of Harlem, 8th grades, and then also families who may have gotten an offer that they didn't like and they want to kind of.
There's always a large number.
Yes.
Mhm.
So
disgruntled
it's
families
super
that may not
exciting.
get the match they want.
It's
That's
very, very,
real.
very, very exciting. We, just to kind of, I guess, bring this out back home, the way we fund, we are funding the IB program, the International Baccalaureate Program at Maha, is through a federal grant that we have for school diversity, which we're still in touch with all of our folks at the federal government. They're still there, but we're definitely concerned that a grant that's called, it's not only the federal grant, the name of the grant is Fostering Diverse Schools.
Yeah.
And
that's-
so,
Was it SIPS grant?
And
SIPS?
and so we're, but so far, I mean, the good news is that, like you were saying about Mississippi earlier, the good news is that like the majority of states that actually receive the grants are red states. So New York, we're at District 3 and 13 are the only
Is
districts
that
in New York.
Clinton? Because they're an IB high school as well, right?
No, well,
Their
we
funding is
chose to
different.
go IB, their funding is probably different, but
Yeah.
but anyway, the point being that we're a little bit concerned about that going forward as well. Daphne assures me that next year will be fine. It's
That's what
after
they
that I
say.
should worry about
It's already been appropriated.
Right.
Yeah, they try, yeah.
Cash
You
the
know,
check as soon as.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
But don't even
They
Brad,
called it that.
Brad tried to do
Yeah,
that.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, we have a lot of things to really be excited about, and we have some great work happening in Harlem. We have our mid-district working group that we have in this district that's really thinking about the class size work and what rigor means in our schools. And so I've actually sent an invite to you guys for those.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that's
send it.
interesting. And you'd earlier asked me what's going on with the space at 165 that my hall used to occupy.
Good question. I'm also
They need to
recused
close it.
from
They need to close it.
talking about, all
I know
right,
that's
hey,
not yours.
stop it.
I mean,
Stop
for
it.
me, you know how many, I'm
I
glad
know.
for COVID, but when Marlon opened up that space to parents and was like, hey, come, I'm like, are you nuts?
This is.
I'm not walking up 5 flights. I was
But also,
exhausted.
has the roof work been completed on that building?
Yeah, is that where, is
Yeah.
that?
There were leaks
because
on
there's
the
no,
top
Yeah,
there's no more scaffolding.
Yeah.
I think
Okay,
those-
so
Yeah,
it's
everything's
not
been
leaking.
gone.
Yeah,
no.
no, I don't know.
So it's a viable space.
It's definitely, so that's what, hey.
Whew,
No,
that
no,
gym.
No,
Okay,
I thought you
don't
said
get
you
me started.
support me.
I do.
No, the fourth, I think the 4th floor is fine. The 5th floor is a little bit rough.
Yeah.
Even my, right? It's a
Yeah,
little bit,
it
the hallways are super narrow and yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the 4th floor, it's significant space on the 4th floor. I can't, speak to, invite Maria.
But it would give it
but
some
she's
freedom
look-
for
Well,
165 to expand if it needs to.
Definitely,
for class size.
that's for sure. When 165 is one of our growing schools, especially with like the closing of Ascension and a lot of folks are, and as we continue, if we decide not to accept, let's say, out of zone families in a lot of our schools, you're going to see that
It will
schools like
increase
165
demand.
will actually increase. So, so yes, the immediate thing of like expansion there, and if there are other needs, we're gonna be looking at that.
What happened with the space in 75? The middle school
We
closed.
have I mean, that space was not that many rooms.
Right.
So so 75 took
They
space,
took
and
it?
then as a district office, I think we occupied 2 rooms. Or
Oh,
3
okay,
rooms.
okay,
3 rooms.
okay.
3 rooms.
I thought you were.
So because under this administration, we've expanded, like district offices have more staff. We merged Westside Collaborative with Lafayette, so they needed more room. So we gave up some rooms in that building, and then, but it's my office has to be there because it's it's one of our few accessible buildings. and
In
it's-
Joan Park.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Joan Park, but like the other members of my staff can be in 75. So we have,
Where the
a-
district offices used to be.
yeah, it's 75. Yeah, we have like a little split side thing going on.
And no conversation of Lafayette expanding,
To like 6 to 12.
IB.
Yeah, so my
Just bring back
Brian would
memories.
probably kill
Only
me.
expand one middle.
Yeah,
No,
that
no,
was my,
no,
that
no,
was
here's
my,
the
that was
thing.
my school.
No, here's the reason. I say right now, no. And the reason I say it is because the way you build a strong 6 to 12 is by building having a middle school that's sustainably enrolled. I think Lafayette is still a little too small
Okay,
to build out to 6 to 12. It's around 200 kids
right,
right now.
dual language still.
Yes, they have a
French.
dual language French program there. So I would say, the reason Mott Hall is like our second biggest middle school behind Booker T. So
Mhm.
I thought that was more of a, and so
Sustainable,
as long as we're now with the ability to bring in kids from other districts to our middle school. I know you're all District 3, but we need the kids. Right, so it's filling the seat. So if we see the continued upward trajectory, that's something that we can put on the table in terms of an expansion. but
And are
right
the
now,
kids coming from D5 or D4?
So the numbers just came in and we haven't dug deeply into it. We don't really have the data yet. We know that our schools have received, we're able to extend more offers, so more folks applied to our schools. We don't exactly know where they're coming from just yet.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a great.
That is good.
And nobody's closing, nobody else, right? Okay, and no more
Everybody
charters.
likes District 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
You like this, you like, everybody likes this.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
you.
that's okay.
Yeah.
It's enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So far, we're in a good spot. And so I don't foresee any immediate like structural changes in that regard. I think, we'll see what comes out of some of the class size implications. Because sometimes there's like shifts you can do there.
Also realistically, there potentially shifts in when they really implement the class.
Yeah,
size
that's what I'm
rules.
saying, yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Hopefully
I haven't
we
seen a
see
lot
you in
of
May,
grand
and give
plans
us
on
a-
it.
Yeah, I'm gonna try, bro. I'm gonna try as best as I can. This is great and lovely. I'm happy to come.
Thank you, this is great, yeah.
I
And we will,
appreciate It's really
follow up
helpful
with
to-
Gail as well to see what's going
And
on.
just make sure you tell her I came, so she doesn't,
I will
are you
definitely-
gonna?
Yeah, no.
I'm
I will
sure-
let her
so
know
she
you were
doesn't yell at
here.
me.
I will let her know. Thank you so much.
All right, take care, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was our main topic, but we do have some new business because Jamie had some ideas that she wanted to present to.
I don't really have
The committee.
ideas. Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you.
I don't have ideas. I've been discussing with, your co-chair, my and Avi's not here.
He had a school thing tonight.
Yeah.
My deep concerns about what's happening in Washington. And we've been kicking around whether there really is anything or nothing we can do. I don't know if you saw today, but they shuttered the Office of Civil Rights for the DOE in Foley School, downtown. So all of the complaints that are brought on behalf of students, including those with special needs, but all issues of civil rights now, the lawyers are deeply concerned because they don't know how they can proceed. I thought maybe we could hear from those lawyers, or we have people on our board who work in this arena. It just feels to me, I kind of feel we should do or say something. But what would it be? We're obviously not gonna ask state for money. We're not gonna ask the city council for money. We might ask Mike Bloomberg for some money. But I thought we might advance our thoughtfulness about it if we brought a speaker in May, and perhaps before we step away for the summer, had something thoughtful to say, at least on behalf of our most vulnerable children. And I've discussed it also with Beverly, who has experience in Washington, and a couple other people on the board, and everyone seems aligned that it's not out of our
Purview.
out of our purview, thank you. Out of our, I was gonna say jurisdiction, but purview's better. But I also don't want to overstep, because this isn't my committee. So I thought maybe, and I started drafting a resolution, but you know, again, not my committee. So I thought maybe to bring somebody here next month and then perhaps go from there, but maybe not letting it go to the fall.
But I agree with not letting it go to the fall. It seems to me that, I mean, it is possible to write resolutions that don't have a very specific ask, right? Like our
Mhm,
ask can be to make a statement rather than, can you fund X or can you open Y, right? So, because realistically, if we wanted that Office of Civil Rights reinstated, you know, like we're shouting at we could say, hey, President Trump, we think the Office of Civil Rights should be reinstated, but I
Has
don't.
such a long history of listening to Community Board 7.
Yeah, exactly.
I just happened to be reviewing a little brochure from the Center for Constitutional Rights. That would be a great speaker. Other such organizations.
Like the Brennan Center and
Right.
such, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, for
Exactly.
sure.
And it might be something that is beyond just having us listen to it. It could be a program that we just put on the, on Zoom for everybody to see
Oh, that's interesting.
and publicize
So more of a
it.
public service
That's
and
an
less of
interesting
a.
idea, yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah.
I like
The
that. idea.
ACLU, I mean, there's so many, I went to law school.
Like
with all
host
these
Well, you
people.
know, it's
an
interesting, a
event.
lot of people are now hosting these Know Your Rights forums,
Mhm.
fora, none of which I've gone to. But I think they're very useful for people. And we might do something around
I hadn't
education.
thought about it in those
See, I
terms,
know a
Audrey,
lot-
but I
I
think
know
that's
a
a
lot of
really
these
good
people
idea. You, because
Just
Audrey
by
works.
accident, because I
But
went to
Audrey,
law
you
school with them.
yourself could
Yeah.
do a, if you gave it thought between now and, I didn't want to call you out in this meeting, but I was thinking you were one of the people we could have speak to us. Between now and next month, some thinking about what we could do as a committee and then a community board.
It's not like an emergency that we have to like, 1, 2, 3, do it. What we have to do is plan who we're going to do outreach to. So
Who can speak and who our audience would be.
well, the audience, would you can do a general
Yeah.
outreach for that. But, who might be, I mean, at this point, as I said, I had this brochure, I got rid of it. But I can go on the internet.
Oh, I know
and-
the folks there.
Right,
from
because I
my-
was
my
going
work.
down the donor list and I said, that one, that
Yeah.
one, that
Yeah.
one, that one, I knew them all.
I mean, I do feel, getting back to Ira's earlier point about Mississippi, and this is just my feeling, speaking only for Jamie Floyd, not for CB7 or, but this feels to me very much like an attack on education that harkens back to pre-Brown versus Board of Education. I mean, I feel that this is a very, we've ever since 1954, we've had a, cyclical back and forth of we will educate all children equally. No, maybe we won't. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. And it's not just about race. And that's why when you mention Mississippi, where I spend a lot of time at my work, by the way, that is a very targeted and considered thing they're doing. But it's not just about race. Of course, it's also about poor white children, and it's also about disabled children, and it's about all of that. And there's not an interest, I feel. And there's always been this tension between education for all equally, education for some only. And this is just more of the same, and that's why I'm rather exercised about it. And so but there are so many little pieces, so many little ways to get at it. Is it just about our 5 to 10% in New York? Is it just about children with special needs? Is it about the larger philosophical Brown versus Board ethos that I believe have in District 3. You know, it's a big nut to crack.
Jamie, I share your concern and thank you for bringing it to our committee. Actually, I was the one that spearheaded the DEI resolution. And I think we as a community board could really set the standard. And unfortunately, you know, the Upper West Side, even though we are a liberal group of people, there's some that feel that we're not really liberal. And I think this is a way for us to really not only talk the talk, but also walk the walk. And maybe we bring in a couple of speakers, including law. Maybe there's a lawyer who specializes in civil rights. Additionally, I think there's several nonprofit organizations, one which I give money to annually called the Marshall Project. Jamie, I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, I know them very well.
Yeah, so I give money to that on an annual basis. Additionally, I think maybe we engage Sean Abreu's office as well as Gail Brewer's office to maybe have some sort of, and I don't want to use the word rally around this, but to bring awareness. And it's not only about, you know, race, it's about sexual orientation, it's about gender, it's about disabilities, it's about all of that. And I don't know if there are any civil rights organizations within New York City that are part of the city or maybe the state ecosystem we can bring in as well to really have an all hands on I don't want to say powwow, but force out there to really bring attention. So thank you for bringing that to the board tonight.
If we wanted to do this, we'd have to have a subcommittee that would meet and do research on the internet and come up with a list of names and topics.
Okay.
And then, you know, present to us as a group and then move further and further.
Yeah, I like that idea.
That's great. But hang on, I want to speak.
So just a couple of thoughts. I think, you know, one, generally supportive of this idea. I'm just to put that all out there. I think two of my concerns with it are, one is the timing of things. I think what we're noticing with the current administration, and I don't want to get too bogged down in the specifics of it. I know it obviously is a specific conversation, but there's a flexibility that I think that we're seeing in Washington that we're not used to in the speed in which things happen and change, where even in the matter of education, it was, we're getting rid of the DOE, and then it was like, and people came out with all these articles that were like, and there goes funding for special needs, and then there was, oh, actually, we're gonna carve out special needs.
Yeah.
Right, so like, it's over there, it's happening.
Wait, you mean that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I just want to clarify. You mean that the Trump administration then said, well, we're not eliminating the funding, we're going to put it over here.
No, what I'm saying is, what my understanding of it was, and then this is harkening back a month ago, which was an eon
Could
ago.
have changed.
But when the conversation first came, when I was reading about it this time, was we're looking to close the DOE. And there was a huge outcry from folks who were saying, on your question about special needs, well, that impacts very quickly special needs community.
Right.
And then there was a response shortly after of, oh, we will tailor this so that there's a carve out.
Correct.
So I think, but my point with all that is that I think
But they are still, he did still sign, correct me if I'm wrong, he did still sign the EO to shutter the DOE.
That's my understanding. Yeah, and again, like my point with bringing this up is we are meeting on like a monthly timescale. We're trying to get
moving landscape.
Yeah, and so I think that's just one concern with this.
Yeah.
You know, I will also say, just as a voice in the other direction, Neil Gorsuch, I read a book of his recently where he talked about specifically education. And I don't want to get too bogged down into the politics of it, but he brought up this idea that, you know, there's sometimes these things are not necessarily inherently bad, where when states get to try something, it can be a proving ground for the rest of the country. He gave an example in Michigan where they were seeing low enrollment in public schools in certain cities. And they started these programs where if you were able to, depending on how long you were a student within the public school system, the state would guarantee up to full, I believe it was full tuition for an in-state university, assuming that you graduate from the school. And he gave this as an example, and then other states then adopted it. The point of his story wasn't, he being a more conservative judge, so I'm trying to keep the politics out of it, but the point of the story was that sometimes these are not necessarily bad things, they're
Trial and error.
it's an opportunity for us to test out ideas that can then be extrapolated. So I want to caution against this idea that, we need umbrellas that cover everything, but I think we do sometimes, right? We do want protections for all classes of people. We want, all of that stuff, I think, is probably what you're driving toward, but sometimes this idea of a state being an incubator for ideas is not inherently a bad one. And that specific example of a school system, actually something sounds to me like a very exciting idea where you have potentially New York City public school students where we're seeing enrollment issues. I think if you said to them, if you said to New Yorkers, hey, if you were a public school student from kindergarten through high school and you graduate and you're guaranteed free college at any of New York State schools, I think you probably see a lot of people who would be very interested in that idea.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that realm is starting, like Kathy Hochul is starting, like with the high school students here in New York, but, with that said, it's the money.
Yeah,
It's the dollars, that states rely on from the feds.
Yeah.
So just like we were just talking about, 5% is $2 billion.
Yeah.
We've been fighting for years.
Yeah.
With, trying to get funding. So it's great. And I do appreciate that point where allow the states to do something, but where are we getting the money from?
Well,
If, the feds are taken out of it.
Of course.
Well, and education has always been a state by state issue. There's no question, even with a robust Department of Education started by the late great Jimmy Carter. The Department of Education never said that schools aren't going to run education. But if we go back, there's no way to take, respectfully, there's just no way to take politics out of it.
Yeah.
If we go back and look at what happens if we leave the states to their own devices, they fire hose our children. They stand in front of the schoolhouse door to keep children from being educated together. It's just, this is in my lifetime. This is in my lifetime. So I can't say that I trust the state of Mississippi. I mean, right now we're in New York City, so I'm concerned about District 3. But the reason we have a Department of Education is because it's the same reason we have a Department of Justice.
Yeah.
There has to be federal oversight of the ways in which the states distribute civil rights and
How they operate.
Whether disabled children are being treated fairly. One of the lawyers who's concerned about the shuttering of the Civil Rights Division in New York was suing over the lack of access to school buses for some of the poor children who have disabilities, because that's her job as a federal lawyer. So that's what I'm concerned about. That's what I'm concerned about.
And let's not
Hang on, I
forget
just want
about.
to get back to like the idea of hosting an event. It doesn't necessarily mean that it comes up, whatever the event is, doesn't need to say, we have the answer, right? Like this is the answer, what everyone should be doing. But I do think it's informative to us and informative to the community to hear about what's going on and what different like civil rights lawyers or whatever are thinking about doing now, right? Like, and recognizing the changing landscape, that is a real challenge to hosting an event, but as far as the event goes, that's part of the information they can be sharing, like our department no longer exists or whatever it is, this is what we're doing now, this is what the state can pick up, this is the way we, just
I think
learning more about
the
it.
idea of like an event is a very, like.
And I think we need to move fast because these executive orders are moving fast because time is not on our side. And, to piggyback on what Jamie said, it's at the federal level. And yes, New York State, New York City, we have control over it, but it's about the funds, is what Deirdre said. And then it's not fair to other states that Mississippi, which is predominantly, has one of the highest Black populations, and it's one of the poorest states in the country, that they should suffer. We need accountability at the federal level.
I would also say though, like, I think, something like an information session, there's a great value to that. We saw it in Health and Human Services, where there was a lot of exchange over knowing your rights when encountered by ICE agents, and the resources that might be available to community members, both here or outside of this community. That being said, I also think that there's a great value when we have actionable items as far as resolutions. So I don't think it's like an either or, I think it's both and. I think exploring a possibility, like an opportunity to inform community board members, community members, something that can post online is a good thing. But I also think when we have those tangible, very like concrete, actionable, financial, those are the things that allow someone to say, hey, CB7 wants, I'm going to take something from HSS here. It's like, they want this CT scanner for this hospital and it cost $1.2 million.
Right,
And it's like,
very
that's a
specific.
very specific
Yeah.
thing. And like that allows someone to very clearly trace the success of that resolution. So I would like, I personally will like kind of keep percolating on this, but I think like those are things that are also like information is important. Overarching statements are important. And I think also specific asks of local officials, of, whether it's congresspersons or assembly members, whatever it might be, those are all also like important. I think it's like a 3-part sort of.
I'm very excited about this idea. Unfortunately, this is now my busy season, so I can't really do much until July. So.
Well, what I'd like to do as a committee is if we could form a subcommittee to work on this, for now we'll call a civil rights event. Is that a catch-all phrase that works? Civil rights, education, civil rights event? Like
Didn't
about
Brad-
education?
Brad had
Civil
one
rights
recently
makes it
too,
too
right?
broad.
The senator had one too. So yeah, I think that's a great theme.
But I think that's like the best way forward, because we don't have a real clear idea of what we want or who we're talking about. So if we can have a subcommittee kind of work on that.
I think that
And then-
addresses the concern that, let's not move too hastily, given changing nature of events in Washington. But maybe in the fall, there'll be something concrete to address in terms of a specific ask or resolution or, but if there's an appetite for something for the community, a subcommittee could maybe investigate people
Work
to
on that.
invite and.
Jamie, I'm gonna task you with extra work, even though you're not on the committee, because you're passionate about it. So listening to you now, what I'm trying to figure out is what we all are thinking time frame wise. Because my interest in my work is definitely on this space, this 1972, because that is driving me bananas, and I think it needs a real concentrated effort to make sure we get across that deck with something useful to the community and not wasteful, like we've been spending all this money, but so now you're saying kind of fall.
Well, for the very specific consideration of what's coming out of Washington, only because I hear that we're thinking there's not.
No, I think that's realistic, because
But I'd be
time
happy to
frame
meet-
wise, I think like we just said, May, we're focusing on the 1972 issue is what, again, it just sounds good.
Oh,
to
yeah,
give
he's
it a
coming
number.
back, yeah.
And although that doesn't mean that you can't, because the event would be on a separate date, they could definitely run
Yeah.
side by side. June, we usually kind of have, well, there are not that many parents on this committee, but for parents, June is a hell month, because the school year is wrapping up, there's a lot to do. But generally, I try to make those meetings that are wrapped for the year so that we can inform the district needs statement. Like, we're trying to come up with what's going into the district
we have
needs
the same,
statement, and then,
we have the same,
and then July and August, we don't meet.
right. And I also
July
think
and
if we-
August is a great time to have the subcommittee meet and do its planning.
Yeah,
I
I think
volunteer for that.
that's good, and I also think trying to have any sort of informational session over the summer, I hate to say it, but I think people are less inclined to engage,
No, I
members of
agree.
the community are probably
Yeah.
less inclined to engage, they're out of town, or they're engaged with kids in camp and all that kind of thing.
Right.
I'm happy to meet over the summer. I don't go anywhere.
But
do
my point about, like, I wasn't saying that we were being hasty, it was more that like, it's a moving target.
That's
So-
how Trump operates.
No, I know, but my point being that like, if we try to address Texas, like by the time we get there, they're doing Y. It's like, now we gotta move to Y. It's like-
Right, if you're looking
Yeah.
at this great speaker for June, whatever the issue is. could
Yeah, just
change.
tell me, yeah, that's my concern with it, is
Yeah.
less of like rushing, it's more like we can't rush fast enough. It's like, it's.
Yeah,
Well, is this focused, Jamie, on just education?
that's, well,
Because
listen.
Based off of what we're saying now is there's so many moving pieces.
Yeah, I feel, I won't mention the person. I saw a person from Capitol Hill give a talk recently. I don't want to mention the individual because then we get all caught up in the politics of that individual. But this person gave a talk and this person said to constituents, focus, lock in on an issue you care about. Because what Trump does is Trump
Chaos,
throws everything
everything
at the
out,
wall
yeah.
so that you're so busy spinning at every single thing
You
he
can't
has
focus.
said in the last 24 hours. You can't focus on one thing, and at the end of the day, you're exhausted.
Right.
So
And
I could name
thousands of
5
things that
issues
have
we
gone
could
by.
talk about. I care about deportations. I care about, criminal, the rights of criminal defend. I mean, I care
Changes to
about.
libraries.
Right,
like-
yeah.
Pulling back, our committee is
This committee is
education, youth, and libraries, right?
exactly,
So that's where
exactly.
our focus will remain. And
Exactly.
education is certainly a big enough issue.
Right.
And the
Right.
issue, of course, is what will
And that's why I
the
came to
impact
these chairs.
of the destruction of the US Department of Education and everybody in it? What's that?
Yes,
Impact and
that's
how do we
my
do that?
question.
And he
Yeah,
fired the
that's interesting to
1,300
me.
people. And when the judges made the order rescinding the firings in Washington, those are not among the 1,300 who were sent back to work. They remain fired. So my concern is the targeting of education at the federal level. That for this.
Okay, and
That's why
that
I came here.
no, and that I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, there multiple issues.
Yes.
Is it just this committee or you want housing? Because if we're bringing
I'm
a
on
sub,
housing.
right, but if you're starting a subcommittee, is it,
Yeah,
other
should we
a-
work together? on multiple
what
ways?
other
I,
entities?
I disagree. I think it's too complicated.
Yeah,
Pick one subject and really explore it. And
yeah.
When you are in New York City with the Center for Constitutional Rights and the
Yeah.
Civil Liberties Union and this, that, and the other thing, believe me, you have people who can really, and the Brennan Center, who
Yeah.
can look into it in depth. I have to excuse myself, I have to leave, but I'm volunteering to be on the
Okay.
subcommittee.
We'll be on the committee
Okay.
together,
July and
and
August.
anybody else wants to join. I appreciate your point, and I'll sleep, I mean, I just felt so passionately about education that I immediately reached out to the co-chairs, but you may be raising a good point. Maybe it's a way to, maybe there should be one person from each committee thinking more globally about the ways in which CB7 could be responding to this moment.
I mean, that was
It's
just a
an
question
interesting
based off
idea.
of the conversation.
Yeah.
So
Oh, did
again,
you
it's
bring her back?
yes, you did.
Audrey.
Maybe she's going to the rest.
Oh,
I'm gonna put on the.
I mean, it's a really interesting point. I mean, maybe there should be a task, forget subcommittee, maybe it should be a task
Can you
force.
forget your bag?
yeah, so I'm
You
seven
know
task,
That, if you're into that, that's steering.
that's steering,
Oh
and
my
that's
God.
bigger.
Do you come
Yeah.
to steering, Ira?
No,
Well,
We're
if
talking
you,
about something
if you
cross
did,
committee.
no, you are, cross committee is steering,
That's
you
where
are
it
right.
belongs.
Well, Beverly, maybe it's something to bring up with Beverly.
But I think, why don't we just get going, get the ball rolling
Yes,
on an
100%,
education one?
100%.
Like, let's look at we'll build a subcommittee, we'll do education, civil rights, and an era without federal Department of Education. There you go, that's a really catchy short
Impact on
title.
District 3, impact on
We're
CB7.
just gonna add more to that sentence, yeah. But we'll start with that, and
Mhm.
by the time there's an actual event, it will have a catchier title. And then should other committees, if we want to branch out, then it builds through steering and through those other committees. But for now, to get something tangible going, let's just have the education focus, education, civil rights.
Okay, and I'll work
Yeah.
with Audrey and anybody else who wants to work.
Yeah, so
I'll be on the
send out-
committee with you, Jamie.
Yay.
Thank you. So I'll send out a reminder through the whole committee list, and hopefully we'll get some hands raised.
Yay.
That would be terrific.
Great.
All right.
Thank you for
Thank you.
listening.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming, and thank you guys. I want to call this meeting to adjourn.
So, okay.
Second.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
And
Yeah, I think you should. Yeah.
we're doing this just in case of our schools.
Webinar's not off yet, Ira.
Sorry.
Why is it not clicking off?